She wasn't the kind they expected to carry weight, at least not the kind with numbers and power stitched into its edges. The ones who usually walk through those brass-trimmed doors came wrapped in the familiar comfort of assumed importance, their names echoing boardrooms and legacy dinners. But she arrived wrapped in silence, not meek, measured, the kind of silence that makes people rethink whether they lock the vault. One look, and the room recalibrated itself, slowly, as if a rule had been broken, but no one wanted to admit which one. The tension wasn't loud. It never is. It wore a name tag called policy, asked questions dressed as protocol, and smiled just wide enough to hide the teeth beneath. What no one realized, not yet, was that the very foundation beneath their polished floors owed its breadth to the woman they now measured with suspicion. This is not the story of someone losing composure. It's the story of a place losing control. Stick with this series, like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And when did you first sense that everything they thought about her was wrong? Lena Whitmore stepped into Dominion Bank's downtown branch just after noon, a quiet, sharp figure framed by heavy glass doors. Her coat, black wool double-breasted, clung neatly to her shoulders, and her polished flats whispered across the white tile floor. She moved with the unspoken confidence of someone raised to never expect welcome and taught to never ask for it. The check in her purse had weight, not just in dollars, but in legacy. It bore her full name in raised ink, Lena Evangeline Whitmore, drawn from an institutional trust older than the tower the bank resided in. She walked past the waiting area with its artificial plants and stale magazines, heading toward the row of teller booths where 5 clerks sat behind bulletproof glass. The woman at booth 3 flicked her fingers to summon the next customer. No eye contact, no greeting, just fingers, tapping the counter in time with the metallic rhythm of her long nails. Lena stepped forward, pulled the check from her purse, and placed it on the tray, adding 2 forms of identification with smooth, practiced motion. The teller, blonde, middle-aged, with a lanyard covered in cat pins, glanced up, then down again, her expression fixed in a neutral mask that soured slightly as she read the name on the check. She picked it up like it was something found on the sidewalk, turned it, tilted it under the light, studied the signature as though it were a trick. Her hand hovered over the keyboard, fingers typing slow, deliberate keystrokes, each one louder than it had to be. Her brow furrowed, not with confusion, but with suspicion. "Is this your check?" she asked, still looking at the paper. Lena nodded. "You received this from?" "A trust," Lena said, "managed by Blackstone and Harlow." The teller's nose wrinkled slightly, her mouth forming a tight line. She flipped the check again and tapped something on her screen. Then she looked at Lena properly for the first time. Her eyes scanned her coat, her shoes, her hair pulled back into a smooth, low bun. "Do you have a business card?" Lena reached for her license again, but the teller waved it off. "You've already shown me that. I meant something more current." Lena blinked, her face still. "That is current. Something that shows where you work, or who you're with." "I'm not with anyone," Lena said, tone level. "I'm the account holder." Behind her, a man in a gray sport coat and boat shoes exhaled loudly. "Come on, lady," he muttered. "Some of us have places to be." The teller glanced past Lena and smiled at the man, then turned back. "I'll need to have this verified. Please wait here." She didn't offer a chair. She didn't ask permission. She simply stood, took the check and ID, and walked away, leaving Lena standing upright at the counter as if on trial. Lena folded her hands in front of her. A second customer joined the line, then a third. Conversations hushed. A woman whispered something to her teenage daughter, who stared openly at Lena before being pulled gently back by the wrist. 5 minutes passed. 10. The teller returned, this time without the check, and leaned on the counter like it hurt her to move. "We'll need to place a hold on the funds. 10 business days. Possibly longer." "It's a cashier's check," Lena said quietly. "Issued by your bank." "Yes," the teller said, her tone clipped. "But we still verify, especially in situations like this." "What situations?" Lena asked, no emotion in her voice. "Large checks. Unusual accounts. non-routine deposits. There it was again, that cold familiarity. Lena said nothing. She had been in this exact moment 100 times before in different forms. At a jewelry counter, in a waiting room, at a conference table. The expression was always the same. The vocabulary changed, but the tone didn't. She extended her hand for her ID. The teller hesitated a beat too long before giving it back. "We'll call you when it clears," she said. "Do you want a receipt?" Lena nodded. A machine word, the paper curling like a small white tongue. The teller dropped it into the tray, then turned to the next customer before Lena had even picked it up. Lena took the receipt and stepped away, walking slowly through the main hall. Her coat brushed against the polished chrome stanchions. She passed a security guard who had been watching her for the last 15 minutes. He looked away quickly. Outside, the wind hit her face. She didn't flinch. Her car was parked a block down. She reached it without rush, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door behind her. The interior was quiet. The city moved beyond the windshield in cold motion. Lena's hands rested on the steering wheel, not shaking, just still. Very still. The man at the far end of the row, dressed in a security uniform too tight for his frame, pretended to scroll on his phone while watching her reflection in the glass. A young woman in business attire stood 10 feet back in line and whispered something to the man next to her. He snorted. Lena heard the word entitled, but didn't react. After 12 minutes, Mrs. Dre reappeared, followed by a man in a black vest with an employee badge clipped to the collar of his shirt. His smile was wider, practiced, the kind that accompanied PR statements and denial letters. He introduced himself as Mr. Larch, the assistant branch manager, and waved for Lena to follow him to a small room at the end of the teller line. The space was barely larger than a closet, its walls painted the same indifferent gray as the lobby, with a single plastic chair and a desk stacked with forms. A metal filing cabinet buzzed slightly from some hidden mechanism inside it. Mr. Larch gestured to the seat, then closed the door behind her. He remained standing. "We've done some preliminary checks," he said, sliding the folder open, "and the information you provided doesn't exactly match up with our internal documentation." Lena raised her eyebrows. "What information doesn't match?" He cleared his throat. "Your listed address appears tied to a defunct business. The issuing trust's name doesn't appear in our customer database. And there's a noticeable lack of employer verification." Lena stared at him. Her voice, when it came, was even. "It's a private family trust. I don't list an employer because I'm self-managed. The address is a legal holding company, not a retail business." He blinked, almost confused that she answered so directly. "Yes, well, we're still required to confirm." He tapped the edge of the check, especially in cases that raise certain flags. "What kind of flags?" Lena asked. His pause was short. "Outliers," he said. "Large checks. Uncommon names. Unusual profiles." She nodded once. Her fingers folded in her lap. She said nothing else. "We're not accusing you of anything," he added quickly, the kind of addendum that always follows guiltless profiling. "But in the interest of protecting our clients," Lena cut in, "I am one of your clients." "Yes, of course. Of course you are. Still, we follow a standard process." He slid a new form across the table. "Please confirm your current income source, estimated annual revenue, and include any relevant inheritance disclosures." Lena read it. The form was identical to one she had filled years ago when opening a brokerage account, except this one had no client code and no processing number. "Is this connected to my file?" she asked. "Or is this a new form being created outside the system?" His smile cracked slightly. "It's part of the process." "What process?" He didn't answer. She signed the form anyway, because the alternative was delay, and she knew delay was a tool, not for accuracy, but for intimidation. When she handed it back, he gave a practiced nod and left the room without saying anything else. She sat alone for 8 more minutes before the door opened again, not by Mr. Larch, but by a woman she hadn't seen before. Early 30s, sharp blazer, cold eyes. "Come with me," she said. No introduction. Lena followed her out into the main lobby. instead of returning to the teller booths. The woman led her down a hallway behind the customer service desk and into a new area, carpeted, darker, quieter. The hum of printers echoed behind walls. They passed an office labeled compliance, then another, risk management. Finally, they reached a room labeled interview 4. The door clicked shut behind them. This room had no windows, just a round table and 2 chairs. Lena sat without waiting to be told. The woman introduced herself as Ms. Anson from Risk Oversight. She did not shake hands. She opened a laptop, clicked 3 times, and turned the screen slightly toward Lena. Displayed was an enlarged image of the check, scanned, zoomed in, the signature highlighted in yellow. "Can you confirm that this is your handwriting?" Lena didn't answer. She studied the screen for a moment, then met the woman's eyes. "Yes." "Have you had your identity stolen at any point in the last 3 years?" "No." "Do you currently maintain an investment account?" "Yes." "Have you transferred funds from a foreign institution in the last 90 days?" "No." "Do you know of anyone else who would have access to your financial instruments?" "No." "Are you familiar with the term layered deposit laundering?" Lena said nothing. The woman's tone remained level, but something sharper now pulled at the edges. She asked for Lena's trust tax ID, her filing attorney, and her last known real estate transfer. Lena answered each one precisely. Still, Ms. Anson didn't soften. "We'll be retaining the check for longer verification, 10 to 15 business days, possibly more if the issuing party is flagged." "Flagged by whom?" Lena asked. "Our internal compliance monitor." "What does that mean?" "It means we reserve the right to verify any transaction that doesn't meet our risk threshold." "What is your threshold?" "That's not something we disclose to the public." Lena didn't move, didn't blink. Ms. Anson closed the laptop. "We're done here. You'll be contacted if further questions arise." "Am I being investigated?" Lena asked. The woman stood. Not formally. She left without another word. Inside, the temperature shifted to a heavy stillness. A different teller gestured to her, then pressed a button beneath the desk without looking up. Moments later, the same assistant manager, Mr. Larch, appeared, flanked this time by another man, taller and bulkier, with a security badge half covered by his tie. "We'll be assisting you today," Mr. Larch said, not as a greeting, but as a formality. He gestured with 2 fingers for her to follow. They led her not to the customer rooms or the business offices, but to an open area behind the lobby where file carts and supply cabinets stood exposed. There was no chair this time, no offer of water, no folder or privacy, just an empty standing station beside a metal shelf stacked with printer toner. "Please wait here," Larch said, and both men walked off without a backward glance. The silence stretched as the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her head. Employees moved past without speaking, glancing briefly before focusing back on their papers or screens. Lena remained still. She didn't lean. She didn't pace. She simply stood, hands loosely clasped in front of her, eyes focused on a point somewhere near the edge of a forgotten motivational poster on the wall. A few feet away, a janitor appeared, pushing a rolling mop bucket. His blue uniform hung off his frame in lazy folds, and his headphones dangled from his collar. Without a word, he dropped to one knee and began scrubbing the marble tile beneath her shoes. At first, Lena thought it was coincidence, but then the bucket sloshed deliberately close to her left foot. She stepped slightly aside. He followed. The mop came again, circling around her right heel. Then he paused, looked up, and muttered with a grin curling at the edges. They usually keep the real clients up front. The words weren't loud, but they weren't private either. Lena met his eyes only briefly. She didn't respond. The mop swept wide around her again, the water leaving a smeared trail beneath her soles. When he finished, he stood, offered her a mock salute, and walked away whistling. She remained alone in that narrow passage for 17 more minutes before someone returned. A different bank associate, a younger woman named Mallory with stiff posture and a smile too sharp, called Lena's name as though announcing an appointment in a crowded waiting room. "This way." Lena followed her down another corridor, This one narrower, past 3 locked doors, and into a room marked compliance overflow. Inside were 2 desks, a small camera mounted in the ceiling corner, and a gray filing cabinet with 1 drawer slightly ajar. Mallory gestured at a laminated mat on the floor in front of a camera. "Stand here." "What is this for?" Lena asked, the question automatic. "Standard verification." Mallory tapped at a keyboard. "We need a new profile photo for our internal system. Security update." Lena stood where she was told. The flash came without warning, bleaching the room with white light. Mallory frowned slightly at the screen. "Let's do one more," she said, voice clipped. Flash. Again, Lena did not blink. "One moment." Mallory walked out, closing the door halfway. Lena could hear muffled voices on the other side. Someone laughed. Then silence again. When Mallory returned, she carried a clipboard and handed it over. "We need your signature again. Updated verification." Lena scanned the page. Her name was misspelled. "Please correct this." Mallory didn't look at the sheet. "It won't matter. It's just for cross-reference." "Correct it," Lena said, not raising her voice, but with weight. Mallory took the sheet back, scratched out the spelling, rewrote it sloppily, and handed it over again. "Better." Lena signed it. Mallory disappeared again. Another 10 minutes passed. Lena stared at the camera in the corner, its lens unmoving, blank, yet ever present. The door opened again and Mr. Larch entered. This time his jacket was off, his sleeves rolled to the elbow. He carried a small tablet. "We've concluded our preliminary review," he began, eyes on the screen. "Nodder. Unfortunately, certain elements of your file remain inconsistent with our standard thresholds for streamlined approval." "Such as?" Lena asked. He shrugged slightly. "The trust shows up under a dormant classification. The beneficiary ID does not have an active tax correspondence record in our system." "That's not true," Lena replied. "I submitted every required record." "We're aware," he said, "but the system still flags the match as incomplete. Then the system is flawed." "We didn't design it," he said simply. "We follow it." "Who supervises override protocols?" "They're not in this branch." He scrolled, tapped twice, then set the tablet down. "There's an alternative option if you'd prefer." "What is it?" "We can cancel the deposit, return the check, and close the file manually. You'd need to authorize a release form and collect the instrument directly." "You mean take the check back?" "Correct." "After all this?" "Yes." "And if I don't?" "Then we continue our review, and the hold remains in place. The outcome will likely be the same, but it will take longer." Lena stared at him. "You'd rather push me out than correct your process." "I didn't say that." "You didn't need to." "Do you wish to retrieve the check?" She didn't answer. Her silence stretched. Finally, she said, "Yes." "Very well." He left the room. 30 minutes passed. No one returned. Lena opened the door herself and stepped into the corridor. An intern, startled by her presence, dropped a stack of papers. She didn't stop. She walked back toward the lobby, her steps measured, chin high. As she passed the teller booths, she saw Mrs. Dre glance up and quickly avert her eyes. The check was never returned. She waited another 3 days before receiving a letter, folded neatly in a standard envelope, stating that her instrument had been deemed non-processable under Section 4 of the institution's internal criteria. No contact number, no apology. The trust had not been invalidated. She made no effort to speak with the teller. Instead, she approached the front desk and asked to see Mr. Larch. The receptionist's smile dimmed when Lena gave her name. The woman disappeared behind the security door without a word, leaving Lena standing in the open. Minutes passed. People came and went. No one looked at her directly, but she felt the heat of glances grazing her like insects. When the receptionist returned, she did not speak. Instead, she nodded toward one of the teller stations. "Mrs." Dre stood behind it, her arms folded, her mouth drawn in a thin line of distaste. Without speaking, she lifted her hand and made a curling gesture, crooked fingers beckoning, a silent command rather than a polite invitation. Lena followed, saying nothing. She was led past the main counter, beyond the polished front desk, through a narrow corridor marked staff only. No one stopped them. No one asked why a client was being escorted into a private zone. They passed cubicles cluttered with paperweights and half-eaten lunch trays, and finally arrived at a door propped open by a rubber wedge. Inside was a break room with vending machines, a battered microwave, a scratch table surrounded by plastic chairs, and a flickering overhead light that made the beige walls appear jaundiced. The floor was sticky in places. An old coffee stain spread beneath the fridge. One of the blinds hung crooked, bent at an awkward angle, as if it had been pulled too hard. A television bolted in the corner played a muted daytime talk show. In the corner, a junior employee, young, pale hair buzz short, was leaning against the table, eating from a crinkled bag of chips. When Lena entered, he looked up, eyes scanning her in an unhurried, amused arc. He crunched loudly and smirked. "Didn't expect customer service to include wardrobe reviews," he said, motioning toward her blouse. "Dry cleaners charge extra for custom jobs?" His tone was light, joking, but behind his eyes was something colder, something that delighted in watching dignity crack. Lena said nothing. Her blouse, ivory silk with a single faint crease near the hem, had been pressed that morning. She didn't look at him. She looked at Mrs. Dre, who now gestured toward a lone chair near the fridge. "You'll wait here," the teller said. "A supervisor's reviewing the file again. It's best you stay out of the lobby until it's resolved." "Resolved how?" Lena asked. "They'll let you know," Dre said, already backing toward the door. "Just don't move around. This is a secure zone." Then she was gone. The door closed behind her, not slammed, but shut with finality. The young man laughed again and walked out without another word. Lena was left alone. The walls pulsed with a muffled thrum of printers, conversations, and ringing phones from beyond the staff hallway. The television continued its silent stream of color and movement. She sat on the edge of the chair, straight-backed, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor in front of her. She remained that way for 32 minutes. No one returned. No explanation. No documents. She wasn't given water. No one checked on her. She had been placed in a forgotten space, a liminal nowhere designed not for customers, but for staff in need of caffeine or isolation. At minute 33, the door opened and another employee entered, a woman carrying a lunch tray. She stopped short when she saw Lena, her eyebrows knitting. "You're not supposed to be back here," she said, annoyed. "This area's restricted." "They brought me here," Lena replied. "Who?" "Mrs. Dre." "For what?" "To wait." The woman frowned, set her tray down, then walked out without another word. 2 minutes later, another man entered. This one wore a badge marked facility support. He didn't speak at all, just collected a coffee pot and exited, glancing once at Lena, as if he expected her to explain her presence. She didn't. She remained still. Her neck ached from the rigid posture. Her stomach turned with slow-burning nausea born not of illness, but of frustration turned inward, of being treated as a contamination rather than a client. Finally, after nearly 50 minutes, Mr. Larch entered. His tie was loosened. He looked tired, but not apologetic. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "we're concluding the review today, but we need one final confirmation step." "What step?" she asked. "Signature revalidation. In person. With a witness." "A notary?" "An internal reviewer," he corrected. "Bank policy. And if I decline, then the file remains open, and your check will be held until internal audit clears the discrepancy." "Which discrepancy?" "The mismatch in address and lack of active employment record, neither of which are required for a cashier's check. Still, we're following risk compliance." "And how long would that take?" "Weeks." He pulled a form from a clipboard. "This is the release signature. You'll sign here and here in front of me." "You're not a notary. This isn't legal," he said. "It's procedural." She stared at the paper. The ink was already drying in places where someone else had filled in notes. Her name appeared twice, once with the middle name misspelled again. She made no move to correct it. She reached for the pen, signed, passed it back. "You'll receive confirmation in writing," he said. Then he left again. She was not escorted out. She stood alone, found her way back to the hallway, and walked through the bank's labyrinth until she reached the main lobby. As she crossed the polished tile, Mrs. Dre looked up but said nothing. She arrived 5 minutes before opening. The sidewalk outside was damp from overnight rain. A sanitation truck passed just as she stepped through the entrance, its stench clinging faintly to the doors behind her. Inside, the overhead lights flickered to life with sluggish determination. The lobby was nearly empty, the tellers not yet behind their windows, but she was immediately recognized by the assistant manager, who emerged from a side hallway with a clipboard in hand and a weariness on his face that seemed too rehearsed to be real. "MS. Whitmore will get this finalized today," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "We need you to wait in the intake corridor. One of our regional staff will see you." "Intake corridor," she repeated softly, more to herself than him. He nodded and walked away. Lena followed the only direction available to her. Down the same hallway she had walked through 2 visits ago, past the staff room, past the broken blind, into a different section that felt even more removed from anything that resembled professionalism. A narrow space lined with utility closets, wire shelving, and unframed laminated signs taped to the wall. There was no art, no carpet, no warmth. A single plastic chair, stacked against a cart of printer boxes, was pulled out slightly, as if prepared specifically for her. She sat down. No one greeted her. No one explained anything. A small bulletin board hung nearby, plastered with faded staff birthday announcements and outdated holiday schedules. One calendar still showed March, though it was nearly June. A paper note above it read, "Do not remove," in crooked permanent marker. Lena placed her hands on her lap and stared ahead. She was not given a form, not even a clipboard, just the chair, the wall, and the steady movement of employees who walked by without acknowledging her. At first, she thought it was simple neglect, but then the pattern revealed itself. They were performing around her. A woman in a navy vest passed twice, each time pausing to whisper to someone behind her, followed by muffled laughter. A man in shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow made a wide arc around her, pretending to examine a wiring panel nearby, though he never touched it. One of the junior tellers she had seen on her first visit appeared with a cup of coffee and looked directly at her before muttering under his breath to someone on a headset. She didn't know what he said. She didn't ask. She remained exactly as she had been positioned, still, contained, not speaking. The atmosphere around her was no longer indifferent. It was curated, designed to exclude while making the exclusion feel bureaucratic. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At minute 23, a security guard appeared from around the corner, arms full of file boxes stacked precariously. He saw her, paused, then nodded at her without introduction. "Hey, hold this," he said, and without waiting for a response, dropped one of the boxes onto her lap. It was heavier than it looked. She flinched slightly as the weight landed, its edges pressing into her thighs. The guard didn't wait to explain. "Just for a minute," he added. "Hands are full." And he walked away. The scent of dust and manila folders rose up from the cardboard as Lena adjusted slightly, trying to prevent the box from sliding. No one returned to collect it. She held it for 9 minutes, during which 5 more staff members passed her. 2 glanced. 1 smirked. None intervened. At minute 32, the box was finally retrieved, not by the guard, but by a young intern in oversized khakis who grinned sheepishly, muttered thanks, and disappeared with it into an office. Lena said nothing. The pressure in her arms ached. Her legs tingled faintly from the weight. Her face remained still. At minute 39, a woman she hadn't seen before arrived and introduced herself briskly as Elise from Regional Audit. Her voice was clipped, her hair perfectly pulled back into a tight knot, her clipboard full of pre-checked boxes. "We just need to go over a few more items," she said, without apology or explanation for the wait. "Shouldn't take long." Elise didn't invite Lena to stand. Instead, she flipped through the clipboard, listed off items in bullet point order, never pausing to ask if Lena had questions. "You've previously stated your income source is a family-managed trust. Is this still accurate?" Lena nodded. Do you serve as a sole trustee? No. Are there other signatories? Yes. Who are they? Lena answered. Names, dates, titles. Elise wrote nothing down, but continued. Have you conducted any wire transfers outside the country in the last 12 months? No. Are you currently named in any financial disputes, lawsuits, or claims? No. Do you reside full-time at the listed address? Yes. Can you explain why your employment record appears inactive? Because I'm self-managed. Do you collect dividends or direct disbursements? Both. Is your tax ID number active? Yes. Has it ever been suspended or red flagged? No. Elise checked the clipboard again, then looked directly at Lena for the first time. You're aware that policies are in place for the protection of all our clients, including identification and authentication measures beyond public verification? Yes. And you agree that these measures are in the best interest of financial integrity? No, Lena said, her voice low but steady. Elise paused. Excuse me. No, I don't agree. Then why are you here? Because you gave me no choice. Elise blinked, just once, then turned the clipboard over and tapped twice. We'll be closing your review shortly. You'll receive written notice. Then she walked away. Lena stood slowly, feeling the pull in her shoulders where the box had rested. She smoothed her pants, adjusted the hem of her sweater, and walked back toward the main lobby. No one stopped her. No one spoke. As she reached the front desk, a different receptionist looked up and, seeing her face, immediately lowered her gaze. Lena stepped outside. The sun had emerged. A dog barked across the street. Somewhere a child shouted. The world moved on, but she carried something different now. They wanted to see what it took to make someone unravel without breaking a single written rule. She arrived at the branch the next morning wearing a blazer, simple, charcoal gray, not expensive, not loud. Her hair was pulled back into a low knot, neat, exact. She did not wear makeup. She did not carry more than her phone and wallet. She stood at the front door at 9:02 a.m., watched the receptionist glance up and hesitate before speaking into a mic hidden behind the desk. After a few seconds, the receptionist approached with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're doing some light sanitization in the main lobby, she said. We'll need you to use the employee entrance today, around the side. Lena said nothing. She turned, walked the perimeter of the building, and found the side door propped open with a stack of flattened boxes. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and paper. The hallway was narrow, utilitarian, with bags of shredded documents lining one wall and cleaning supplies stacked in bins labeled confidential materials, do not open. She stepped carefully, her shoes clicking against the concrete floor. As she reached the first turn, a man in a wrinkled button-down shirt pushed a cart toward her. He looked up sharply, eyes squinting in confusion. You with the temp service? He asked, already motioning toward the cart. Take this to the upstairs mailroom. Elevators to the left. Lena blinked. I'm not staff, she said. I'm a client. He stopped mid-step, took another look at her, then gave a low laugh. Could have fooled me, he muttered. Look like you belong with the recycling. He walked off without another word, cartwheels screeching down the hall. She continued walking. Each step felt heavier. Not because of fear, she had run out of fear, but because humiliation had settled into her bones now, not sharp like a slap, but dull, constant, familiar. She reached the interior security door and pressed the button. It buzzed after a moment. No greeting. No one on the other side. Just the sound of a lock disengaging. Inside, the hallway was silent. A clock ticked loudly overhead. The walls were painted beige, but discolored in patches near the vents. She followed the familiar route through the maze of administrative spaces, finally arriving at a narrow room marked Level 3 Financial Review. The door stood open. A man in a brown vest with a red tie sat behind a low desk. His nameplate read P. Hemsworth Transactional Oversight. He didn't look up when she entered. You're Whitmore, he said, still scrolling on his screen. Sit. There was only one chair, metal, no cushion, low to the floor. She's Saturday, we're finalizing the instant file, he said, tone clipped. But we need clarification on how your signature ended up misaligned with a payee endorsement. You did sign the original check, correct? Yes, she said. The original was signed in front of my attorney. Then explain the half-millimeter shift. The signature line was embossed. My pen slid. Is that standard for your documentation? I don't produce the checks. You understand that our authentication flagged it as a mismatch, correct? Your authentication system is flawed. He stopped scrolling and finally looked at her. You don't get to say that, he said calmly. You're under review. I'm under review because you can't admit a mistake. You're under review because you triggered alerts. Alerts tied to inconsistencies that suggest high risk. And what risk am I to you? You're an account, he said. We assess based on data, not sentiment. That's convenient. It's procedure. And procedure is how you hide decisions you can't defend. His jaw flexed once. We're almost done here, he said. But there's one more step, which is confirmation of physical presence at the originating location of the trust's last deposit. You'll need to appear in person at the branch that issued the check. That's out of state. Not our concern. It's part of compliance. That's not protocol. It is now. You invented it. No, he said, smiling slightly, we adapted. And if I refuse, then the file remains unresolved. And the funds, held indefinitely. You agreed to the terms of review. She didn't answer. The silence thickened. He stood, opened a cabinet behind him, pulled a folder marked inactive. This is where you are, he said, dropping it onto the desk. For now. You enjoy this, she said quietly. It's not about enjoyment. It's about certainty. Yours or mine. The bank's. He sat back down. She stood. Then you've already decided. We follow the data. She left the room. No one escorted her. She moved past the buzzing ceiling lights, past the bulletin boards and outdated maps of branch territories, past the quiet snickers of junior staff seated at desks littered with energy drink cans and expired security badges. She exited through the same service hall she entered, past the bins of shredded paper and bleach-stained carts, past the locker where someone had written "Help me" in black marker, now barely visible beneath a coat of paint. She didn't drive to the bank that morning with the intention to reclaim what they owed her. She didn't bring folders or documentation or verification. She brought nothing but herself. And this time, that was enough. She arrived just after opening, her steps unhurried, her posture relaxed, eyes forward. She wore a navy blouse and dark slacks, nothing ostentatious, but tailored to fit. Her coat hung open, not hiding her, but revealing the shape of someone who had already endured the worst and stood through it. The security guard at the door opened it reflexively and then froze as he registered her face. She gave no greeting, no smile, no invitation. She passed through the entrance, across the polished tile floor that had once reflected her hesitation, and stepped into the center of the lobby, where a column stood tall, wrapped in bronze. The pillar bore the weight of a tribute older than the current staff, older than the management, older than most of the building's infrastructure. The plaque gleamed under recessed lighting, its letters bold, crisp, untouched by the rot of time. Lena stared at it, at the name carved into the metal not for vanity, but for history. Whitmore Hall. Beneath it, a brief dedication. In honor of the founding contribution from the Whitmore Trust for the establishment of financial equity and community integrity. She reached out with one finger and touched the W. It was cold and solid. The material bronze, stained slightly with age, but not dulled. She stood there, not as a customer, not as a petitioner, but as the unspoken truth they had tried to erase. The teller, Mrs. Dre, saw her from behind the counter. Her expression shifted. No longer the cool indifference of someone in control, but the unease of a person who has missed something essential and suddenly realizes the rules of the game have changed. Lena didn't move. She didn't speak, but others began to notice. A junior associate near the reception desk paused mid-sentence. A customer looked up from his clipboard and followed her gaze. Even the branch manager, Robert Larch, emerged from his glass office with a furrowed brow, curiosity overtaking indifference. He approached cautiously, uncertain whether to greet, challenge, or retreat. "Ms. Whitmore," he said after a pause. She didn't answer. She continued looking at the plaque. "Is there something we can assist you with?" She turned her head slowly. Her eyes met his, steady and unreadable. "You've read this, haven't you?" she asked, voice low but clear. "Of course," he replied. "It's part of the building's legacy. It's my name." His lips parted slightly. "Yes, we're aware of the Whitmore Trust. It's my name," she repeated, firmer now. "My family." "I see," he said, although his eyes betrayed that he hadn't. "Not until now. So when you delayed my check, flagged my file, made me sit beside garbage and laughed at my blouse," she continued, each word a blade wrapped in silk, "you were doing that to the person whose name hangs on the foundation of your bank." "Ms. Whitmore, if there's been a misunderstanding—" "There wasn't," she said. "Every gesture was deliberate. Every delay calculated. Every insult allowed. The only mistake you made was forgetting who you were dealing with." Behind her, the lobby had gone quiet. A dozen eyes fixed on the scene, but no one moved. No one interrupted. "The funds you questioned," she said, stepping closer. "They're part of the endowment that helped build this place. The office you're standing in, the building your title sits beneath, all of it made possible by the very people you tried to humiliate." Larch opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked past her to Dre, who had gone pale, her hands trembling slightly as she fumbled with the drawer. "You see," Lena said, quieter now, "it was never about the check. It was about the assumption that I didn't belong, that someone like me couldn't possibly be the one behind the legacy you profit from." The room remained still. Even the buzz of printers and phones seemed distant. Lena turned back to the plaque. "You didn't just try to humiliate a client," she said. "You tried to erase a name you thought didn't matter. But it matters. It always did." Mrs. Dre, the teller who had held Lena's check with contempt and scorn, avoided the lobby entirely, hiding in the records room. Employees whispered between terminals. Some knew only the outlines: client confrontation, plaque speech, a name that meant more than they realized. But others had read the email. A single message from upper compliance, marked internal. "Review incident at Whitmore Hall branch. Escalation pending. Full audit recommended." It had spread through the system like a warning flare, and with it came the weight of exposure. But Lena did not return to the bank that day. She did not walk back through the doors, nor wait at the counter like a guest uncertain of her welcome. Instead, she waited in her office 6 blocks away, on the top floor of a commercial building owned by the Whitmore Property Group, the very building where Dominion Bank rented its regional headquarters. Her suite was glass-walled and understated, the kind of elegance that didn't have to speak loudly to be felt. Her desk faced the skyline. The windows were spotless. Her assistant, a quiet, meticulous man named Everett, stood at her door at 11:03 a.m. and said, "She's here." Lena nodded. "Send her in." The woman who entered wore the kind of suit that whispered money and wore in equal parts. Her heels were sharp, her eyes sharper. Patricia Norrell, Regional Director of Compliance and Ethics. She moved like someone used to forcing change with nothing but a pen and a policy. But as she stepped into the office, her poise slowed slightly, registering the height, the view, the unobstructed authority of the space. Lena did not rise. She waited. Norrell took the seat across from her. "Ms. Whitmore," she began. "I've been briefed." Lena said nothing. "Let me first say that the events that occurred in our Whitmore Hall branch are deeply concerning. They do not reflect the values we promote." "They reflect the values you allow," Lena replied. "They reflect the culture you've protected." Norrell folded her hands. "I didn't come to argue." "Then don't," Lena said. "Listen." Norrell hesitated. She was not used to silence being used against her. "The name on the building," Lena said slowly, "isn't just a label. It's a promise. My family helped build your institution because we believed in access, in financial dignity, that anyone, regardless of background or skin, should be treated as a participant, not a threat." "We recognize the mistake," Norrell said. "Do you?" "Yes." "Or do you recognize the liability?" Norrell's pause was just long enough to confirm the answer. Lena leaned forward slightly. "Let me make this clear. I don't want a settlement. I don't want hush clauses. I don't want performative apologies crafted by PR. Then what do you want? Norrell asked. I want your systems audited. I want every policy that flags trust instruments under my name reviewed. I want every employee trained not by manual, but by consequence. And I want a written acknowledgement from the board that the Whitmore Trust has been misrepresented and mishandled. You'll have to make that request through. No, Lena interrupted. You're here. You'll take it back. You'll deliver it yourself. And if I don't, then your lease expires in 60 days, and you'll be looking for new space. Norrell stiffened. You wouldn't. I already have the papers drafted. A beat of silence stretched between them. Why didn't you say who you were from the beginning? Norrell asked, almost a whisper. Because I shouldn't have to. The quiet that followed was heavier than anger. Norrell stood, slower this time. I'll deliver your terms. Good, Lena said. I'll expect your reply by Friday. Norrell nodded once, then turned and walked out, her steps quieter than when she entered. Everett reappeared and closed the door behind her. The message, while vague in tone, was unmistakable in urgency. All staff, it declared, would undergo mandatory retraining under a newly developed module called Legacy Client Relations, Equity, and Protocol. It would include video sessions, case study reviews, and monitored compliance scoring. It would be tracked, audited, and enforced with exactness. There was no mention of Lena. Not her name, not the plaque, not the confrontation, only the shadow of what had occurred, threaded between bureaucratic terms and soft language that implied correction without admitting wrongdoing. But the staff knew. They whispered in the break room when no one was looking. They texted each other after hours. They remembered the stillness in the lobby when Lena stood at the column bearing her family's name. They remembered the way Larch hadn't spoken for minutes afterward, how Mrs. Dray had dropped a stapler while fumbling with a drawer, and how even the intern had stopped chewing gum mid-motion. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Dray did not report to her usual teller booth. Her desk sat empty, a single white envelope resting atop her drawer. No announcement was made, but later that day, it was mentioned in quiet tones that she had been reassigned voluntarily, according to the line fed through management, to a satellite branch 2 towns over. Fewer clients, lower traffic. A demotion masked as redirection. The senior teller on duty that day nodded without expression. No one asked where she had gone. They simply adjusted. That same afternoon, Larch arrived late, parked in the far lot, and was called into the regional office. He did not return. Word spread that he was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending internal inquiry. Not terminated, but not protected. He would not be missed. The walls of the bank absorbed the shift without noise. Staff began reviewing scripts with more care. Tellers greeted clients with phrases they hadn't used in years. Compliance supervisors began sitting in on routine appointments, watching body language, taking notes. New name tags were issued. Lanyards replaced clip badges. Uniformity was enforced under the guise of professionalism. But the true reason remained unspoken, carved not into policy, but into memory. Lena did not step foot in the branch again. She didn't need to. Her voice, used with precision, had done more than the loudest protests. Her silence afterward echoed even louder. She hadn't published a statement, hadn't spoken to press, hadn't written a single social media post. But inside Dominion's headquarters, her name appeared in capital letters on a private memo passed between executives. Whitmore Trust Class Client Legacy Account Status Red Flag Removed. In the week following Norrell's visit, Dominion Bank's board met twice, behind closed doors. One session lasted nearly 4 hours. During that time, not a single executive disputed Lena's authority to request reform. The risk of exposure was too great. But more than that, the optics of silencing someone whose family had built the institution, whose name adorned the walls they now worked under, had become indefensible. Compliance officers were ordered to scrub the system of any custom risk tags applied to accounts under the Whitmore family portfolio. Attorneys reviewed non-disclosure protocols to ensure no retaliatory clauses had been triggered. A team from HR was dispatched to conduct anonymous interviews with frontline employees about manager behavior and client interactions. For the first time in years, Staff felt their words carried consequence. They spoke, carefully but truthfully, about microaggressions, about coded language, about the way certain clients were treated as threats while others were ushered in with lattes and smiles. Meanwhile, Lena remained above it all, literally and figuratively. Her office 6 floors above Dominion's regional hub became a symbol, a specter that loomed quietly over every decision. When Dominion's lease came up for renegotiation, a small clause was inserted, drafted by Lena's attorney and agreed to without revision. All Dominion Bank branches operating within Whitmore-owned properties shall adhere to annual equity evaluations conducted by an independent third party. It was the kind of clause that seemed simple but had teeth. If the bank failed to meet the standards, they would be in breach. It was not performative. It was binding, a quiet guardrail against future erasure. Employees came and went. Some stayed, some didn't. But the new hires, trained under the post-incident model, learned fast what the veterans now whispered. Know who you're dealing with. Don't assume silence means weakness. And always read the plaque. At the branch itself, little changed in decor. The walls remained the same soft beige. The layout unchanged. But something deeper had shifted. Clients were now greeted with eye contact. Delays were met with explanations, not silence. And the name on the central column, Whitmore, was polished more frequently, not just for appearance, but for memory. Lena, for her part, returned to routine. Meetings, calls, documents. Her calendar remained full, her days structured. But a single note remained on her desk, handwritten by Everett, discreet, undated. The most powerful message is the one they pretend not to hear, yet change everything to avoid repeating. The weeks that followed did not bring fireworks or headlines, no grand gestures of public repentance, no redemption arcs painted in neon. What came instead was slower, quieter, and far more real. It began with a subtle shift in posture, the kind people make when they realize they've been living crooked for years. Inside the Dominion Bank Whitmore Hall branch, the mood altered not from fear, but from awakening. It started when Mrs. Dre, now seated behind the counter of a modest suburban satellite branch in Barrington, took her first client of the day, a middle-aged man with calloused hands and a gentle voice, who handed her a check drawn on a trust fund and waited for the usual battery of suspicion to follow. But it didn't. She paused, looked at his name, and saw it clearly. Not just the letters, but the man, the person, and something inside her, the place that had been quietly, comfortably judgmental, tensed, then loosened. She approved the check, not because it was safe, but because he was human, and she was finally seeing clearly. That night, alone in her apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and a clock that ticked louder than the silence it occupied, she opened her laptop and began typing. Not to HR, not to legal, to Lena. The letter was short. It didn't beg. It didn't excuse. It acknowledged. I didn't know who you were, but I should have treated you like you mattered anyway. I'm sorry. It was signed simply, M. Dre, and sent with no expectation of reply. It sat in Lena's inbox for 2 days before she opened it. When she read it, she said nothing. She only stared out the window a little longer than usual, then archived it. No reply. No need. She had never wanted an apology. She wanted change. And now it had begun. Back at Whitmore Hall, the branch felt different. Clients walked in without the stiffness that used to accompany anything out of the ordinary. Tellers no longer leaned back with folded arms when confronted with a surname they didn't recognize. They asked. They learned. They listened. One morning, a new trainee named Samuel paused during a client meeting to request guidance from a supervisor. The client was elderly, soft-spoken, and confused by her paperwork. The old response would have been to redirect her with a form letter and a blank stare. But Samuel waited. The supervisor came. Together, they clarified the instructions, helped her sign with confidence, and walked her to the door. It was a small moment, but small moments are the seeds of transformation. Meanwhile, across town, Patricia Norrell returned to her office with a change of pace. Her usual habits, walking briskly, speaking sharply, checking emails obsessively, remained. But something had shifted. A new note on her desk, scrawled in her own handwriting, served as a daily reminder. What we protect defines us. She began calling branch managers, personally instead of relying on memos. She asked for input, not just reports. She listened. One afternoon, she called the branch training team into her office and asked a question she had never asked before. What does fairness feel like to a client? Not look like, feel like. The room was silent at first. Then they spoke. And what followed was a month-long overhaul of client-facing materials, internal documentation, and staff interaction protocols. The new orientation binder for all hires began with a page titled The Whitmore Principle. It read, "Every name holds a story. Every story deserves respect. Every action builds our legacy." There was no footnote, no legal disclaimer, just the truth. Word spread, not fast, not loud, but it traveled. In meetings, in interviews, in conversations over coffee and elevators. People started mentioning it when onboarding staff. Not as a warning, as a guide. Legacy was no longer something mounted on a wall in bronze letters. It became a practice. Across the Whitmore Property Group building, tenants began noticing small changes. The security team that once offered cold glances now nodded respectfully. Receptionists began to greet by name, not by badge. Even the cafe in the lobby changed their practice, no longer assuming who could afford what. Lena walked those halls often, not as a symbol, as herself, quiet, focused, a presence. She never mentioned the bank again, not in meetings, not in press, not in private. She had said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done, and now her silence carried a different weight. One not of exclusion, but of arrival. One Friday morning, Everett stepped into her office, holding a sleek black folder. "They've signed the new charter," he said, "including the equity clause. Full implementation starts next quarter." She nodded. "Have they reviewed the community grant proposal?" "Yes," he said. "Approved. 40 scholarships. Under the Whitmore name." She looked up. "That's the number my grandfather gave the year he founded the trust," she said. "Exactly. Then it's right." The moment passed. They moved on. Outside her window, the city pulsed with its usual hum. People moved. Streets filled. Time pressed forward. But something had changed, and Lena felt it. Not in fanfare, not in headlines, but in the way no one questioned her presence anymore. She had reclaimed space not through confrontation, but through clarity. And the message she had carved word by word, action by action, now echoed through every branch of the bank and beyond. Legacy is not permission to exclude. It is the responsibility to include. The arc of humiliation they had forced upon her had not ended in revenge. It ended in redefinition, not just of her name, but of theirs. And as that truth rippled outward, reaching offices she would never step into, and touching hearts she would never meet, the real triumph emerged, not in a single dramatic twist, but in the quiet revolution of ordinary people choosing to do better. Every teller who paused before judging, every manager who questioned a policy, every intern who asked why instead of obeying without thought. That was the victory. That was the turning of the leaf. Not an ending, a beginning, the end. If you've been following Lena's journey and felt the weight of her silence, the power of her truth, and the ripple of change she created, we'd love to hear from you. Was there a moment that hit hardest? A scene you didn't see coming? Let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what did the story mean to you? If this narrative kept you engaged, consider supporting the series by liking the episode and subscribing for more intense, character-driven storytelling. Your feedback shapes what comes next, and your support keeps these stories alive. Stay with us. This is only the beginning.